But the subject, I'm sure this community is to ever, and they a diversity event to break tradition, having this special event day for the, join me in thanking them. Thank you all very, very. Need to be held. He can pull you back if you're too loud. Let the microphone come to your face, and then if you're too talk, hold it. Names out that way. Okay. Well, you have. And you've met the dinner. So, to and the author.
And tonight to this event for a whole bunch of things. Need to be, you met them all. This Q&A question time. So and try to go back in time meeting with and I thought we'd do that's a little different. What I wanted to ask of you, I think it's Brandon, we'll go Tony, Dan until after the unraveled, and I'll speak briefly. What I want you to do is if you back and think about, and I can think of use for the book. It's something that I hope sides of Dan this format.
A very guy, we would activities was just tell stories, very opinionated, conservative on most from the time we were doing the right thing, the juvenile detention, glamorous stuff, and I remember him decided that our dad was home. He had was just going to naturally. He did.
Your dad liked to.
He was growing up, and because his yeah.
In general, he's like, what kind of music? He says, do you listen to? And he said, you don't know.
Appreciate that. Guy perspective. And I was. Gosh. Here again, your first. I mean, I know. First impression, and then also.
Melissa, that y'all are. I said, well, yeah. Then you had been more careful. And if this gentleman's in the is a guy to come over to my house right now. Friends. That wasn't the circumstance. To walk through, able to be here this evening. Both of us in Dan, my mouth kind of hung open, and like many, from there, kinds of people that we saw. Those emotions, but proud to work with him, but and he was a citizen. Know him.
Yeah.
Me about it. I've dealt with once we to be sure, but it was undercover meetings. The go to these meetings. In the situation looks like going. Back and they download that he was getting 30 years as a process. And in South and from the Department of Justice days on the state. 3 different attorneys. Recordings and talking. They heard those
of being an informant. Yeah.
again. His shoulders and that is the
and go from there.
Instructions. The 3 men were arrested. Funny. I was trying to see that.
Because Dan was all about gun safety, and he was like so careful, so into guns, but so careful about them. And the fact that I had agreed to go shooting with him, I think, I think that meant I was okay, I guess, in his eyes. So that we just built off of that, and over the, and it actually became, usually when I work on these projects, whether it's I used to, be a newspaper reporter, but been writing books for a number of years now. Try to maintain what I call a journalistic distance during the reporting, because you want to get all the reporting into the story you can, but you're independent and you got to go where the story goes. But it was hard with Dan. You hang out with Dan, and it's easy to become his friend, which is probably why he was a good informant. The way he could just kind of. You could relax around him. He was funny. So it was sort of hard to maintain that. And I was, in a way, once the book was filed and going through the editing process and that whole part of it's done, I didn't have to maintain that anymore. And I felt like, just as everyone I think is up here said, Robin has said it, he went from being the subject of a book about this case. And it was important that he played such an important role in the case, but it was so important that he shared his story, because this is it's a cautionary tale about what's going on in America. And I just felt like we had evolved from that kind of journalistic distance to, I could now call him my friend. And even though the book was in production and in manuscript, he would text me, I would text him, we would talk on occasion, keep up. I know he was up and down with health struggles and whatnot, but I felt like we talked about getting together again, and we did at a campaign event for Tony and Brandon. All that stuff, I'll never forget, and it's so meaningful to me now, not as an author, but as a friend of Dan's. So that's my encounter, my first and lasting impression. I think we have a few minutes. Yeah, we have a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, we do have some time for some questions to anybody on the panel. About the case, about our experiences. We all bring different experiences to this story. Yeah, Benjamin, I see your hand up. Go ahead. Did everyone hear the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
The question was to either me or Robin, and the question was there ever a time that we thought Dan's not going to make it out of this alive?
So one of the things that you heard about in the video is something that Tony touched on as well, and that was Dan's safety. I don't want to give anybody the impression that we just kind of threw Dan out the door to the wolves and, oh, we hope it's going to turn out okay and maybe he'll come back. That's not how we work. That's not what happened. But one of the key critical points that is worth repeating, to have the misconception that Dan was Audie Murphy on steroids and just fantastically brave. Dan was just like all of you. Pardon my vernacular, Dan was scared you know what, and we were regularly concerned about his safety. We took every possible step we could to make sure that it was all okay and that he was going to end up okay.
So I shared all of Robin's concerns all the way through the investigation. I mean, we were very, very concerned about Dan. Curtis Allen threatened to kill him. I have no doubt that he would have. I'm going to give a slightly different perspective, though. Or would today. Yeah, I mean, you heard me talk about the hatred in their eyes. I firmly believe that. But like Dick, I didn't meet Dan until the trial. And then at the trial and all the way up to sentencing, I had to maintain an arm's length relationship with Dan because he was a key witness. And as a prosecutor, you just can't get friendly with a witness. And it wasn't until after I retired. And it was the day after I retired that ABC contacted me because DOJ wouldn't let me participate in any sort of interviews about the case. And so the day after I retired, I started speaking with the ABC reporter. And through that, Dan and I got in touch. And after that, we started communicating on a regular basis. And we actually, much like Dick, we became friends. I don't think that you can interact with Dan on that kind of a basis and not become friends with him. It's just how he was. And the more I got to know him and the better I got to know him, the more he opened up to me. And the more I began to understand the struggles that he had with PTSD. And, I've deployed overseas. I was in Iraq the same time Curtis Allen was, interestingly enough, and he claimed he had PTSD, and that's what drove him to do this. But so I've known a lot of people in my life who've had PTSD, but I'm not sure I saw or that I've known anybody who struggled with it as much as Dan. And one of the things that made me happy about our relationship is that we were putting him in a position where he was starting to get help for that. And that's primarily, I think, thanks to Noah, who you're going to hear from here in a little bit. But it was really gratifying. I was so concerned about him when I started to learn the depths of his struggles, and then so gratified when Noah and others reached out and started helping him with that. So.
Okay. Any other questions, or we'll move along to the second panel, Matt, I think. Is that good? Are there any other questions? We have a few minutes. Great. Well, I really appreciate your being here, your listening, and hopefully you're all getting to know other dimensions of Dan Day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dick. I'd invite the members of the second panel to come on up. And while they're coming up, just a reminder that there is a QR code on your program that gives you the opportunity to give to the Hero in You Fund as well as to the Day family. There's also pastors from local churches taking up a free will offering out in the hallway as well when you leave tonight. And so I know the the family and the Finney County United Way appreciate your support. If you are writing out a check for either of those purposes, please write that out to Finney County United Way. All right, second panel. Looking for you. All right, you heard Ben Anderson's name mentioned a couple times. Ben had helped connect several people up here with each other and was going to come attend this event and agreed, hey, Ben, you know, there's like 10 panelists. The odds of maybe there being something that comes up and somebody's not going to be able to sit on the panel, you're familiar with both topics and what we're trying to get out of this event. Could you serve as a substitute just in case? And sure enough, that worked out. So, you know, with a couple days' notice, come on up, guys. He agreed to step in, and we moved some folks around on this panel, and he agreed to moderate this panel, and I think you're going to really enjoy this. So, formerly Kearney County Hospital Administrator, his bio is in your handout. He's now in Colorado and coming back to visit and help us with this event. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben Anderson and panel 2.
Howdy. It feels like a reunion in here. I've gotten to see probably 50 of who I would consider close friends. Pastors and medical providers and community leaders and locals and refugees and those that are both. Anyway, it's really an honor to be back with you. Spent 11 years of my life in this part of the country and learned how to wear boots to work. And I appreciate the opportunity to be among you. I want to open by just saying, if you are with the Day family, Dan came by that kind of courage, honestly. He came from good stock. And I want to thank you personally for being here among us and choosing to spend your evening reliving that. Because you didn't have to. And our region, this community, is indebted to you for the sacrifice all of you paid. Not only Dan. I first got to know Southwest Kansas. We're going to do some brief introductions here. I'll open by just saying I was the administrator or the CEO of Kearney County Hospital in Lakin, and we took care of patients from 20 counties. Women would drive 2 hours to deliver a baby in our little hospital, but I was particularly drawn to this region because of the diversity here, and I was particularly curious about the East African Somali community moving here, knowing none of them, and so I spent a doctor friend that Ephra mentioned earlier, Dr. John Berkey, and I would just go into the African shop every couple of weeks and buy tea and dates and honey and raisins, and those are the only 4 things, or olive oil, the only 5 things we think we could use at home, until my wife was like, we're all going to get diabetes, no more dates. But I was just looking for reasons to be in there, and over time became friends, but I will admit very publicly to you, and I'm a little embarrassed at this point to admit this, that I wondered if I was exposing my family to risk by doing that. Because maybe they were connected 1 or 2 steps removed from Al-Shabaab or some extremist group. But just worked through the fear and showed up anyway, having no idea that during those same months and years, our family was being put at risk, not by East African extremists, but by people among us. And so I am sitting here on a panel with 4 very insightful people who I view to be heroes, and we're going to begin by introductions from each of them, just a brief introduction. So starting with Amy, and then just go down the line. Who are you? What is your role in the community? And who are you? What do you do? And what's your role in the community?
Thank you, Benjamin. Who am I? I am a daughter. I am a mother of 4 beautiful children. I am a wife of a dedicated husband. And I'm from Garden City, a place I'm so proud of to call home. I am a leader in this community because I am present in spirit and in person. When I get a phone call, even in the middle of the night, I remember having conversations with Dan Day around 1 a.m. That is who I am. This is a home I'm very proud to be a part of.
Hi, I'm Erin Keeley. I would say similarly to Amy, I'm a friend and a neighbor, a sister and a daughter. And for my day job, I'm a physician assistant locally at Kearney County Hospital. I'm still trying to figure out why I'm on this panel. I think that it's because I have amazing friends. These 2 ladies in the corner there. I've just been my life has been really transformed and impacted by cross-cultural friendship since 2016, and I've been really welcomed into specifically the Somali community, but many refugee communities here, and just am, I think, a witness of the power, the transformative power of cross-cultural friendship.
Good evening. Good evening. Before I introduce myself, would you allow me to introduce my fellow workers at Tyson Foods? They are here tonight. Can you please all rise? I would like to acknowledge your presence, especially our complex plant manager, Bill Dirksen, and our plant manager, Jose Godinez. My name is Jonathan, and I work for Tyson Foods for almost 18 years now. And I joined this community when I started to work at St. Catherine Hospital as their hospital and hospice chaplain. And I served 16 counties as a hospice chaplain. I got certified with Veterans Administration, and I said, I think I need more exposure. And at the time, Tyson Foods opened their chaplaincy program, so I tried to apply, and praise God, they gave me the position. And I've been working there as their chaplain for the past close to 18 years now. The reason why I would like to introduce my fellow workers is that at Tyson Foods, there are about over 40 different countries represented in our plant. Can you imagine that? 40 different cultures, 30 different languages that we deal every single day. That's why I so admire our leadership for keeping us together every single day. It's a challenge for me to be working as a chaplain, to take care of the spiritual needs. And since day one, when the Somalis joined the community, I really have loved them. And so with the other ethnic groups that have joined our community, Garden City. The first day that we flew in with my wife, she cried because we're from Houston, Texas. And she said, this is such a small place. But look, we've been here for 20 years now, and we love the people, and we love the community. That is why we're doing our best to give back to the very community that have loved us and that have served us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Chief Utes.
Thank you, Benjamin. My name is Mike Utes. I'm a retired police chief from Garden City. I had the privilege of serving with the city of Garden City with the police department for almost 37 years. I moved to Garden City back in 1984 from a small suburb of Toledo, Ohio, after I got out of the Air Force. I was stationed in Germany, living in the Toledo, Ohio area. It was a very diverse community there. When I was in Germany in the Air Force, working 9 different military bases, I found it very diverse. And then moved to Garden City when jobs were hard to find back in 1984. I had job apps all over the place. Came to Garden City. I was here for 1 year, found my wife, married, been married for 37 years. She put up with me for that long. But we are remaining in Garden City. I retired March of 21. It didn't take long. About 6 weeks later, I got hired on part-time working for a Department of Justice entity with Mid-States Organized Crime Information Center, where I still reach out to law enforcement in western Kansas. I used to call home, Maumee, Ohio, as my home. It didn't take me but a few years to realize this is my home. It's because of the diverse community. It's things like what happened in 2016 that you look back and you see how the community comes together. And then you look out in the audience and look at what this community is about. This is why I and my wife raised our family here, 3 daughters and 9 grandkids. So Garden City, we are truly a blessed community with the leadership and the diversity we have in this community.
Thanks, Chief. I'm going to jump into some questions for the panelists, and the first one I've got is, Amy, when news broke that 3 white supremacists were trying to blow up a city mile and put a hole in the ground, what did you think and why did you stay? Why did you stay here and continue to invest?
Well, I guess I can use this. 2016 was a year that many, just like me, may never forget. I do clearly remember that day, Chief, when you called me. It was in the afternoon. I was the director for refugee program covering Garden City, Liberal and Dodge. I was sitting in my office when Chief reached out to me. I remember that conversation. I couldn't make sense of it. Chief, I don't think I understood the gravity of what you were talking to me about. But I want us to flash back. In 2009, my husband was a student at a pharmacy school in Minnesota. He was doing his residency in his final year. During his practice at the hospital, he met one doctor who is a Garden City born and raised, and one of the current community leaders in the community here. And during the break, they got to talk, and he asked, "You're about to leave pharmacy school. What is the plan?" My husband said, "I don't know." If you remember 2010, the recession and market of recruitment. So this Garden City born doctor is like, "Oh, I know exactly where you should go. You should come to my hometown. You should come to Garden City." And my husband paid attention to her, and we began to walk towards coming to Garden City. And some of the things she emphasized is Garden City would be a great town for you to raise your children. At the time, I was a mother of 2 and expecting our 3rd child. A few months later, we got into a U-Haul. We didn't even come to Garden City to check the place if this was going to be the right place. By faith, we packed and left the Twin Cities of Minnesota and drove all the way to Garden City. 14 hours later, as we were pulling up, approaching the town from the eastern side of town, I was asking my husband, "Are we there yet?" If you have children, you remember how children ask, "Are we there yet?" And you're like, "No, not yet. Are we there yet?" "Not yet." And I was like, "Is there even a town ahead? Like, we have been driving for hours. You may see some homes, you may not. Where are we going?" But I remembered what the word garden did to me. It is Garden City. Who wouldn't want to live in a garden, right? A place full of flowers, fruits, and that produces vegetations to feed the soul. So we came to Garden City. At the time, now I had 3 children. My now 12-year-old was 2 months old. I now have a 15-year-old, 14-year-old, 12, and 6-year-old who was born in Garden City. We came to Garden City to raise the future of this country, of which from me it is 4 contributions born and being raised in Garden City. We came to Garden City to give my children what I didn't have as a child. I was born in Uganda. A few years later, Well, thank you, Mommy. My mom is here today. She always hears about how I talk, but it's her first time to see me share my story. Thank you, Mommy. A few years after I was born, we fled Uganda for South Sudan, for now South Sudan. And within the 15 years that I spent in Sudan, now South Sudan and then Sudan, there were a civil war. I probably moved every 4 to 5 years. Came back to Uganda as a teenager, stayed in school even when the bullets were running day and night, went to law school, graduated, went to practice human rights law to advocate for the right of any little child born. I came to this country, didn't sway from that, went back to work within advocacy right, now within the refugee and new immigrants for the past 8 to 9 years. How could I run? I ran as a child. In Garden City, I'm now an adult, a mother of 4, taking care of my husband's mother and my mother, a community leader. How could I run? As an adult, as a family member, you don't run even when things go bad. You stay and you talk about it. You sit around the table and you have a conversation. And in Acholi, my ethnic group, we say, you drink from the same calabash. You drink from the same pot, from the same cup. It is a reconciliation. Benjamin, if I ran, I wouldn't be here today to have this beautiful reconciliation so that we, as members of this beautiful family called Garden City, can come together, irrespective of what happens, and acknowledge, irrespective of the color of your skin, irrespective of your accent, of your history, we are from this community, we are from Garden City, we can talk and reconcile and continue to be as one. That's why I didn't leave.
I give you an amen. That's a good one. Chief, this question's for you. 37 years you served this community with the police department. I imagine you have seen both the sunshine and the shadows of this community, the good and the hard. You, I imagine, have developed an understanding of how things are that maybe many of the people in this room don't have access to, but you've also got a vision for what it could be. What can we as leaders in this community do to strengthen it from your perspective?
Keep doing what we're doing. Look around the room today. Look what happened in 2016. You're right, Benjamin. 37 years, 41 years in law enforcement. I've seen some bad, I've seen some ugly, but I've seen some good, I've seen some great. Today is great. Today is a great day when we as a community come together and thank the Day family and thank our criminal justice system for doing what they did to put some bad guys away. As leaders, we need to make sure that we build relationships and we understand where folks come from. I learned a long time ago as a young detective. I've worked under 3 other police chiefs, and I've learned from each one of them. I've learned from other chiefs. I've learned from other mentors out there, from other great leaders. I've learned from my command staff. Garden City, you have a great command staff and chief here in Garden City with the police department today. It's because we mentor each other, we teach each other. When this came up, we talked about it as a team. We also learned throughout the years, I'll go back as a young detective, that when we had the influx of the Vietnamese community, the folks from the Southeast Asian communities did not, their culture did not trust law enforcement. They did not trust government. They did not trust banks. So don't just take it for face value that this is the way it is. Find out why it is. When I was a young detective, we had an influx of home invasion robberies in the Vietnamese communities. And they weren't reporting these. And folks were getting tied up, pistol whipped, shot at. So I, along with former Chief Hawkins, we were partners together as detectives, we took it upon ourselves to learn more about the Vietnamese culture so that we could gain trust. And we did. We finally gained trust, and we finally made friendships, and we finally were solving cases, and we were building a great community in the Vietnamese community. And that came with every portion of this community, that refugees, immigrants coming into this community. When we had Somalians coming in, Haitians coming in, it's important to learn about their culture. If you want to lead, you need to find out about their culture so you can work with a diverse community. The easy way out is to say, welcome to Garden City. Here you are, here's some houses.
Here's the 2 fingers off the top of the steering wheel when we drive by.
Yep.
It's our welcome to town.
Yes. It's more important, and the city leaders, the community leaders in this community do that. I have seen that before the bomb threat, during the threat, and after the threat. So that would be my recommendation for leadership in this community, is continue what we're doing, what we do best, be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
So step 1 accomplished, they showed up, right? We're
Yes.
here.
Yes.
And so we continue down that road. Thank you, Chief. Jonathan, next question's for you. You know the insides of the diversity of this community perhaps as well as anyone that lives here. If you wouldn't mind, start by sharing your own story of immigration, coming to this country and then ultimately to this community. What did you experience firsthand as an immigrant?
Okay, I'm happy to share that. Well, my journey to migrate here in the U.S. took me 15 years. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and you know how strict our immigration law is in the Philippines back then. And when I graduated in high school in 1978, my family told me that, hey, as a gift, we want to send you to the U.S. to study in the U.S. I tried, and I got denied. And so I already have 2 sisters here in the U.S. working as nurses. And they said, well, keep on trying. So I tried several attempts, and I keep being denied. And they even told me, don't marry, don't have a girlfriend, wait until you can come, because it will take you 25 years if you ever marry. So I got married at the age of 39. That was a sacrifice, right? So 1993 was when I flew in straight to Houston, Texas. That's where my sisters live. And 2 months after that, I pastored a church in Corpus Christi, in a Presbyterian church. And a year after that, I went back to Houston, worked with Compaq Computers, and I was a pastor, and there was no church to pastor. So the best thing to do is to build a church. I'm a church planter back home, so I started to build a church in Houston, and until now, the church is existing. So it was then that my mother told me she was dying of cancer in MD Anderson, and she said, why don't you become a chaplain? 3 years after her death, it struck me, and I said, if I become a chaplain, I will be living my mother's wishes. And that really inspired me to be a chaplain. I trained at MD Anderson Cancer Center. I was assigned there at the very department where my mother died, and I became an oncology chaplain. And so I was all set. I said, okay, oncology chaplain. I got assigned to work in a New Orleans hospital as oncology. My wife and my newborn baby doesn't really like the place, so they said, Dad, look for another place. I found St. Catherine Hospital. And they took me in, worked there for 2 years, and I saw how diverse the community is then while I was working at St. Catherine. And so, like I said earlier, I got certified with the Veterans Administration where I can work in any veterans hospital. So I said, I need more exposure, I need more patients to visit. And right there, Tyson Food opened their chaplaincy program. I jumped in. I was offered the job, and I was surprised, and I said, God, are you calling me somewhere else? There's no oncology concerns here. This is a place where there are a lot of diverse communities, interfaith, intercultural, interreligious, all kinds of it's here. So one day, the complex human resource manager challenged me. It was then Dale Masters. And he said, Jonathan, can you kind of do a kind of leadership among the Somalis? And I said, well, you know, he was my boss, and I said, oh, yeah, sure. Then I went home, and I was wondering, how could I? I mean, spiritual leadership, I'm totally detached. They have a different set of beliefs, and I don't know if they will listen to me or not. So that putting aside, I started to listen. I started to talk. Muhammad right there was the very first leader that I worked with from the very beginning. And it was already then that I was starting to organize the different ethnic groups, which I think I will share later on another concern. So I will discuss that more later. And so this community, as they said, is a majority-minority community, regardless of whether you look at that in quantity or in, culturally. There is this presence of people joining the community, and as such, I personally believe that we need to create an appreciation of each other's culture. I remember when I was younger, when my dad told me, oh, if you see the differences, don't talk about the differences. And of course, generations have changed. And I started to learn that how can we appreciate if we put aside differences? Why don't we just talk about differences and learn how to appreciate them, right? And so that's where I was really inspired to open my experience as an immigrant to other fellow immigrants in the community.
Thank you for sharing that, Jonathan. I appreciate it. This next panelist I got to know when she was in PA school, and she was still in Wichita at Wichita State, and moved out to western Kansas with really a mission to integrate herself into the communities that she so loved and wanted to serve. And so, Aaron, you have uniquely immersed yourself among your patients by moving into the apartment complex where they live and befriending them as an equal, as a sister, as a sibling, as a deep, meaningful friend and family member with them. What simple steps would you suggest? I mean, so that decision to do so proved to be profoundly helpful during COVID, for example, when it was time to test people for COVID, when it was time to engage them for social distancing and masking, when it was time to call on people to consider the vaccine, those types of things. What steps would you suggest for the people in this room that may not be positioned to move into the laboratory apartments yet, but want to engage and take steps toward a stronger, more unified community?
Thanks, Ben. I think I have Ben at least partly to thank for being in Garden City. I'm thankful to be here. I think there are vacancies at the Labrador Apartments right now, so if you want to live in the best neighborhood in town, you can call over there. But I think what I have learned from my years living alongside many of my patients and just being welcomed into community with them is the power of just a simple step towards someone else. So I think my encouragement would be take a step to be in a space that is comfortable for someone else. So when I think about walking across a cultural bridge or, trying to initiate a cross-cultural friendship, I think I would just ask the question, how can you walk toward a space that feels comfortable or at ease for someone else, and how can you be a learner, about someone else's culture, whether that's a neighbor or a coworker. Most of us know someone from another culture in our city, and for a friendship to form, someone has to initiate. Someone has to be the first one to walk across that bridge. So I think my question for all of you would be, how can you walk across that bridge? I think one thing that I learned by living in the apartments where I live is that in our typical Midwestern culture, when you want to get to know someone, you invite them into your space. You say, come over for dinner at my house. Let me, have you in my space where I am comfortable. But in East African culture, I've learned that it's more common when you want to initiate friendship with someone, I think, to go and visit them in their space. And I initially felt rude going over to people's houses uninvited, but Halima Nifer taught me that I could come over anytime, which I've continued to do since then. And then I quickly realized that visiting people usually came with really delicious tea and really delicious food, which I love good food and good friends. So just taking that initiative to go and visit someone, even if you maybe feel awkward at first or you're not sure if you're invited. There's a little bit of a risk, I think, in walking towards someone else, but the reward is so great when you form connections that are deep and that will change your life ultimately as you learn from your friends. So maybe, I guess my encouragement would be ask that coworker, that neighbor, a little bit of their story, ask what their name is, ask if you can come over sometime and try food from their culture. I think probably most people's eyes will light up and you'll have the feast of a lifetime.
Thank you, Erin. I just wanted to add on what she just mentioned. I'm originally from East Africa, though now I'm from Garden City, on the concept of just come to my house. You don't need to have an appointment. It's actually more exciting when you just knock on my door and come in. Through my work with refugees and my own personal experience is that for our new Americans, when you come to our home or come to their home and they serve you something to eat, it gives a sense of satisfaction, of contribution, that you welcome them to your community. Now at their home, the meal they have prepared, they can now serve you. And that is just a human thing. The satisfaction that this homeowner will feel when they serve you can never be defined. So I will challenge you, if you haven't had a cup of East African tea, you could come to my house or go to the house of any of the families here. It is, first of all, delicious, but secondly, it's a chance for you to bless that household, because as they serve you, they feel really blessed.
Absolutely. We're now starting to spur on different stories as we're triggering each other's memories. I remember it being this was 4 months before the bomb plot was exposed. It was the spring of 2016. At 10:30 at night, I got a phone call from Halima Farah, who is here among us, right over there. She said, my uncle Aran, the owner of the African shop, would like to meet with you. I was in my pajamas. And I said, well, that's very nice. I'd been hoping for a phone call like this for years. And I said, where would he like to meet me? She said, at his home. I said, wow, at his home. When? Right now. And so I remember getting jeans and a hoodie on as fast as I could and calling John Berkey, the doctor friend, and saying, will you come over here with me? I've just been invited into the home of a Somali refugee family, and I'm so excited. So he did the same, scrambled, got a hoodie and some jeans on, and we went over there, and they served us a 5,000 calorie feast that I had no business eating at midnight. from a health standpoint. I've already had dinner, right? But I ate every morsel of it. And at the end of it, I mean, they were asking questions. How do we get a driver's license? And how do we start a restaurant in the back of our store? And how does health insurance work? Why do I have to pay for premiums and then I have to pay to use my health insurance? I said, man, I'm a hospital CEO. I don't get that. Healthcare is messed up. But at the end of it, they said, I asked them a question. I said, have you ever, how long has it been, and how long have you lived here? And they said, we've lived here for about 10 years. I said, in those 10 years, how often do you invite white people into your house in the middle of the night for dinner? And he said, I've never had a white person in my home. I said, in 10 years. And I said, in that 10 years, how often have you been invited into the home of someone who's local here? And he said, I've never been invited. I said, well, that's something we can remedy. And it was really so striking to me that what people want is to know others and to be known by them. And he put his hand on my shoulder as he left. I'll never forget this. And he said, but you're no longer a stranger in my home. To Amy's point, you are my brother now, which means that I stand in front of you when danger comes. That's what it means to be family here. So I walked in wondering if I was in an uncomfortable or even unsafe situation, going into somebody's home I didn't know in the middle of the night, and I left believing that was the safest possible place I could have been, as they invited me into that space. And so to Aaron or Amy's point, we don't always need to be invited, we can just knock, and they're actually blessed or honored, right? I'll transition our time together in this last segment with a story about Dan. So I took Dan to Dartmouth College with a guy named Mursal Nalei, who's also a part of the Somali community, and to tell this parallel set of stories, the story that Tony Mativi tells so well, right, about a bomb plot that was thwarted, or Dick told very well about the bombs that didn't go off, right? So to tell that story and also tell the story of reconciliation and how trust was being established. And from the back of the room, we told it to the faculty at Dartmouth College. So you might imagine the culture in New England and this progressive school and where these folks were talking. She said, this faculty member said, each of you referenced your faith in regard to this story. Can you speak to that? And I gave an answer, and Mursal gave an answer, and I believe, ours were perhaps less remarkable. Just, this is part of our belief system. This is, what we feel called to do. Dan said something different. Dan said, there came a time when I realized one of three things was going to happen. These guys are going to get caught, or I was going to get out, or I was going to get killed. Like, I had to decide, if I'm going to stay in this, one of the two things is going to happen. So I prayed about it, and I heard the Lord tell me, I'm your protector. So I stayed in it. And this faculty was like, whoa. And he closed by saying very simply, there's no fear in love. And I chose the latter. So my question to you all is, what does this look like on a day-to-day for you? Choosing to engage, choosing to reconcile, choosing to build trust over fear. Amy, let's start with you.
Thanks, Benjamin. I remember a conversation with our newly resettled refugee in 2016. I'll refer to him as Mr. M. Mr. M was in his mid-20s when we resettled him from Darfur, Sudan originally. I was one of the crews who were at the airport in Garden City to receive him and show him his home, help him apply for a job at Tyson, balance his budget. He was now independent and considering to go and visit his mother, whom he hadn't seen when he fled as a child. He was really excited at the possibility of being not just independent, but now helping his family back in Sudan. He walked into my office and called me, "Sister, I am shaken. Why did they want to kill us? Why would anyone want to kill us?" He said he fled Sudan in the middle of gunshots and got parted from his family, found himself in foreign land, and made his way here for a better tomorrow, and hopefully one day marry and have a family of his own. I looked him in the eye and said, "You're coming to the wrong person. I don't have an answer." But the answer I can give you is, you have been through a lot. I'm so proud of you. You got resilience in you. This is not about you. This is about what you're gonna do in response. And as I was looking at him in the eyes, I was like, dude, you have no idea. I am shaken too. The part of me that I had buried after coming into this country, where I felt a sense of belonging, where I felt safe, proud to now be a mother, is awoken. I have to look over my shoulders as I drive through the city of Garden City. I lost my freedom to be parking in Walmart and just walk in and out without considering my surroundings. Am I safe? Before I look at someone in the eye, I subconsciously ask myself, am I safe to look at you in the eye? Or by looking in the eye, I might offend you. Maybe I need to look down or look away. And yet, put on the face of courage, put on the face of a mother, put on the face of a community leader. I lost my innocence one more time. But that said, that we as a community, just like each of one of us, we have resilience in us. We carry a sense of purpose. Your purpose could be just smiling at this face that may look like a new Garden City member, and that smile that you will project around Dillon's at St. Catherine Hospital towards Walmart may be the hope that person needed to see. Maybe while you're providing medical care to this patient, slowing down a little bit and allowing the interpreter to convey the message could be the hope this new mother-to-be or this father who is hurting may be in need of. It could just be we as leaders in our respective capacities, while we are reviewing applications, that we will not just disregard an applicant because the person was trained from Uganda and therefore we don't think they're qualified. It may be you, like Susan Richmere, the current attorney of Finney County, gave a team a chance in 2013 to interview me for a position. Maybe that is your role to do, so that we see beyond what we know, but give a second chance to the next member of Garden City, irrespective of what their yesterday was. It could be we in our respective community leadership role to recognize and speak that Garden City is that place where the world grows because of our different backgrounds and diversity, and speak to that and recognize it. Maybe that is what we need to say, that we are who we are, we stand aside in this state. Garden City stands aside in this nation because of the composition of this community, is because of your contribution, and my contribution to make this community distinct. It is recognizing and saying it. So we collectively recognize that it's because of all of us. The sense of contribution that we do give makes us a community stand aside. And therefore, it is us as community leaders spelling out what we need to do so that that child truly belongs and feels safe here.
Thank you very much for that, Amy. Jonathan or Chief Mike, love over fear. Okay. Jonathan, go ahead. Love over fear. What are some practical steps to choosing to engage people and work beyond the fear of what we don't know, or fear of others that may or may not be founded?
Let me start by saying that we at Tyson Foods strives to create a community or an environment of permission where everyone can practice their faith. What that means is that before one can trust, he needs to be respected first. And we at Tyson Foods is a very caring company, and we do our best to treat every team member with dignity and respect. Now, when I'm still working there as a chaplain, but one time I was struck by this need to extend support to our team members. And I was asking, I was praying, and I said, Lord, do I serve these people just within the walls of this plant? Or can I serve them outside as well? How about their wives? How about their children? How about their husbands? How can we serve them? And so that opened up an avenue where we can further express our love for our workers. And so it came, can I share that now? The creation of various ethnic communities. So when I arrived here, I was told that there were some Filipinos in the community. Dr. Arroyo brought me out to dinner, and Dr. Mangosing, Dr. Altamirano, several Filipino doctors was introduced to me. And I learned that they have been here for over 30 years. And so I said, are there other Filipinos? And yes, oh yeah, surrounding towns we have a lot of Filipinos. And I said, well, let's organize. We did, we organized. We have our first association party, and there were over 200 of us. And I saw the potential of creating groups, ethnic groups. And so I also shared this with, the next one was Burmese community, and I learned later on that you cannot organize Burmese or together with Karen and Chin, you know, they are separate. They need to have their own identity. And then later on, the Somalis, through Mohammed, said, hey, can you also organize us? And I said, well, we can sit down, and we did that with, they have leaders, okay? They have elders that I sat down with and we discussed. I kind of created a generic constitution and bylaws that I use in every ethnic groups. And I was sharing this to the Somalis, and at one point I stopped and I said, wait a minute, are they able to understand the concept of democracy? And we have to review back and, and just go through each of the constitution and bylaws and introduce the concept of democracy that in this land we call United States. The people, we the people, has the power, and not just one or two leaders. Do you all agree to that? So after that, the Somalis, we created their community, correct? They have their community, they have their own program to empower their members through citizenship classes, ESL, GED, and then came the college program, which has really helped them. After the Somalis came the Oromo Association, the Haitian Association, and several other groups started to organize themselves. I'm not saying that every time we organize it will become successful. It's just kind of a catalyst, just to inspire them to gather together. Because I believe that when we gather ethnic groups together, we kind of organize a kind of a discipline and control, and we can dialogue. That is why we decided to create the Coalition of Ethnic Minority Leaders, which was later on changed to Ethnic Empowerment Network. And the chief here has a lot to do about the revived group of the Ethnic Empowerment Network. And it's just an informal gathering where we can dialogue together. It's just like this. I believe that the best form of service is to serve them based on their agenda and not ours and not mine. And so that involves a lot of listening. How do you want to be served? It's not like, okay, these are the programs, we will serve you this way. No, we have to listen to them, and we will serve them based on what their needs are. And that's an ongoing thing. A lot of other ethnic groups may join Garden City in the future. In fact, we have the Afghanistans present right now. I have talked to their leaders, their interpreters, and we are slowly organizing their group so that we can better understand them and we can better empower them through the way they want to be empowered. We just appreciate that this is happening in Garden City because we have great leaders in this community, leaders that are supportive. I remember very well when John Dahl here was our mayor, and of course Janet after that. And we worked very closely together. We have this open communication. John can just call me, hey, Jonathan, we have a problem, and we attend to it right away. And there is this trust among the leaders so that we can better serve those we want to serve. But don't forget, ethnic groups are not only expecting our help, they also expect themselves to help us, to help the community. How can they be a part, to have an active part in building this community? Let me close by saying this. In the field of sociology, they have what we call the human capital.
I didn't do that on purpose. I promise. John, I'm so sorry, John. Thank you so much for your comments. I had nothing to do with the mic going off. I know we are right at time, and so I want to close by asking Aaron something. When I first met Dick Lair, in our first conversation around this book, I said, I want you to know that we're not all like these three guys. That's not us. And I shared with him a lesson that I learned from Matt Allen, which was the story of Garden City is the story of America. And what we're figuring out here, the rest of America is following. They're trying to grapple with the thorniest issues. And Aaron, you are immersing yourself among people. What do you hope for the community in which you live, and what do you hope for the rest of us?
I'm going to share two quick stories to highlight this. One was from about a week and a half ago. I was sitting at my good friend Ikra's house holding her 5-year-old Fahima. Beautiful, bright little girl who loves school. And she was just looking up at me, and out of the blue, she asked me, Erin, what color is your skin? And she thought about it for a second, and she was like, I think your skin is white. What color is my skin? And I was like, well, Fahima, I think your skin is brown. And she was just thinking really hard about that. And so I looked down at her and said, Fahima, God made you with beautiful brown skin. And she looked up at me with these big, bright eyes and big smile, and she said, Erin, God made you with beautiful white skin. And it was just this beautiful moment of getting to affirm the beauty of this little girl in the eyes of her creator, and she repeating that back to me and just getting to celebrate that moment with her. And then the other story is my neighbors behind me that have lived near me for several years now. Fatha and Ali are a wonderful Somali couple with several children. And I remember one day I was in their living room, and Ali came home from the mosque where I think he is one of the leaders in the community, and he had on his traditional Somali clothes and just looked very dignified and had, been just acting as a really effective leader in his home culture. And he came home and sat on his couch and switched on his TV and started going through American citizenship questions. And that image of him just merging two cultures so beautifully was really, really powerful to me and taught me something about what it means to be an American citizen. So I think I would say, to sum up, my hope for the Somali and East African refugee community and for the other ethnic communities and for the whole community of Garden City is that each one could be most fully and purely who they were created to be. And that would be affirmed by each of us, that we would call it out in each other and celebrate it and grow in that together for years to come.
Thank you. At this point, I think we're going to conclude this panel and hand this back over to our city manager, Matt Allen, to invite our final guest up for the evening, and you're going to love what she has to say. So, Matt, we'll turn it over to you. Please join me in thanking the panel.
Awesome. Good job. I'm going to invite Noah Eisenberg to the stage. She's going to, I encourage you to give her your attention. She contacted me in February or March, and we got put in touch with each other. And so 6 months later, 7 months later, whatever it is, this is the product of those conversations. And Garden City's got a new friend in Noah Eisenberg. I will let her tell you her story and her connection to Dan. Welcome to Garden City, Noah. The mic is yours.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? So, pardon me, I'm getting over laryngitis, which is kind of funny because people tell me that they never get a word in with me. So they've had a lot of opportunity to chime in this past 10 days. I'm grateful that my voice is back because there's much to say. I know it's getting late, and I know it's been a couple hours already, so I'll try to make this really meaningful, because this isn't about me or what I've helped this community do. It's about why I did it. So I'm a child of immigrants. I'm a Jewish girl from the Midwest who transplanted to New York because she had dreams of becoming great in technology. I did that in 1997. I went to work for Microsoft. I was there for 10 years. And then I left and I went out into the startup world because I had a passion for making people's lives better with technology, and I set out to do that. I came back to Microsoft during the pandemic to continue to forward their vision for doing that every day for people just like you. My focus is in tinkering with technology every day to make people's lives better. That's what they pay me to do. They pay me to think sideways of crazy and figure out what I can do with what they develop to improve the lives of others. My passion is improving the lives of law enforcement, police officers, firefighters, and combat, those who are exposed to combat. And my passion is in helping their brains heal from post-traumatic stress. I also suffer from post-traumatic stress, not related to anything related to conflict or war, but related to things that happened to me in my life. So I was very sensitive to the fact that Dan was going through what he was going through. It was probably the most unlikely friendship that you would ever, Jewish girl, Midwest, Dan, Garden City, Kansas. How did this even happen? And it happened because Tony Bativi was my client in technology when he retired and went to MedCorp. And in my conversations as an executive consultant, I become friends with my clients because they have to trust me to spend money and to bring transformation into their organizations. So Tony and I became friends, and he told me about this massive case and this movie that was coming out. And I watched the movie, and at the very end, there's that little comment section. It says that Dan's suffering with PTSD, and that's what I locked in on. Not just the community and everything the community had gone through, right? A kid of immigrants, my parents came here with $3,000 and a dream. And now they've not only lived that dream, but they've helped others live that dream. So when I looked at that sacrifice that Dan had made, and the fact that he was still suffering, I thought about how my parents came to this country and how many people had reached their hands out to my parents, and how no matter how much my parents were struggling, and my mom made our clothes. If you see pictures of my brother and my sisters and I, it's always the same pattern because she had to find what was cheapest at the remnant store, right? So it was always the same basic pattern. She had a little sewing machine, and she would make our clothes. And I remember the first time I met a person of color, he had come to fix the plumbing. And I remember running out to my mom and saying, "Mom, there's a black person in our house." And my mom took me by the hand She took me to sit down with this man, and she said, how many fingers does he have? And I said, 5. How many eyes does he have? 2. How many mouths does he have? 1. She said, well, he has a heart also, and that heart has feelings. And I sat there, and I sat with this man. I'll never forget, I probably was 7, 8 years old. And I remember I was curious about his hair. And my mom said, what are you looking at? I said, Mom, his hair looks different. And he said, do you want to touch it? And that's when this connection started of me always understanding that it's in my DNA to help others to reach out. So, as I mentioned, there's a job that Microsoft pays me to do. There's a job they don't pay me to do. And my job as a Give Ambassador is what they don't pay me to do. So I'm not here as a Microsoft employee. I'm here as somebody who cares about Garden City, who happens to work for Microsoft, who happens to have the abilities to forward Microsoft's charitable engine to build what Matt and I did with the passion in our hearts, right? It actually started with an idea that Dan and I had. So I'll bring you back to how this whole conversation started with Dan. I called Tony Mativi. I said, I need Dan Day's phone number. He said, why do you need Dan Day's phone number? I said, I want to get him a therapy dog. My dad was an oncologist for many years. He had therapy dogs in his practice. I had trained my own therapy dog as well. His name's Cosmo. He's amazing. And I said, I want to get Dan a therapy dog because I know how much my therapy dog is there for me. On nights when I have nightmares and I wake up, he's right there. I can fall right back asleep. I know I'm present. I know I'm okay. Things got better when I got my dog. Things are amazing now because I have my dog. I remember I picked up the phone and Dan didn't trust me at first. Why would he trust me? And I just said, I really want to help. I know this is crazy. This is who I am. And I really want to get you a dog. And he said, Sherilyn's never going to allow me to have a dog. So I said, okay, well, maybe something else, right? Like I said, Microsoft pays me to think sideways of crazy. So I said, what else can we do? And Dan and I became friends. Now, something funny about PTSD, sometimes you can't fall back asleep. So there were nights when I couldn't fall back asleep, and the worst thing that you can do is pick up your phone and start to scroll, but that's sometimes what I would do. And Dan would see me on Facebook at 3:30 in the morning when he couldn't sleep, and he would chat me. What are you doing up at 3:30 in the morning? Aren't you done saving the world yet? No, Dan, I'm just getting started. And that's how this friendship began. After Dan started to trust me, that trust, again, as Tony mentioned and as other mentioned, he started to open up about what was really hard for him, the dreams, the nightmares. I had a life coach, one of my former startups. It was all based in digital coaching, digital mental health. I got Dan, my coach, free of charge. And he started working with Alex, former combat guy, led multiple tours of duty in Afghanistan, Marine captain, now a PhD and a life coach. He was the perfect match for Dan. And I got my previous company, who I was still an investor and a strategic advisor to pay for that. And Dan was on the way. And we decided that instead of Dan forwarding a story that hurt him, because I remember he called me and he said, Discovery Channel's all over me. They want to pay me all this money to tell the story again. And I said, what do you want to do? He goes, I don't want to tell the story again. But I keep getting pulled, Noah, my instincts, they want to pay me this money. And I said, Dan, your instincts led you through, your job as an informant. What are your instincts telling you now? And he said, instincts are telling me not to do this. I said, then don't. Then let's take your story and let's change that narrative into something that empowers people, right? We've heard everybody talking about empowering people with Dan's story. So that's what we set off to do. And I said, hey, let's call it The Hero in You. Another 3:30 a.m. conversation with Dan. What are we going to call it, Noah? How about The Hero in You? Oh, I like that. Let's call it The Hero in You. So I had the pleasure of meeting Ben Anderson because Dan said, hey, my friend Ben might have an idea or two. Ben and I started talking. Matt and I got introduced. And we started to look at how can we use Microsoft's Give engine to help create this foundation. Here we are. So to tell you that I expected this? No way. But I don't think any good deed is done because we expect the result. Like, look at, the story of planting a fig tree. Nobody ever, right, expects to see those magnificent figs. It takes a long time for those figs. You don't plant the tree because you expect to see the fruit. You plant the tree because you want other people to have that fruit. So Matt and I are already talking about, what are we doing next year? How do we forward this? How do we make this a model that not just Microsoft employees, I will mention that Microsoft has already started to raise money for the foundation. Every ounce of time that I put into helping Matt, Garden City got paid for that, right? Western Kansas Community Foundation, Connie, you're amazing. Connie and I worked together to set up this foundation. Every hour that I spend on Garden City or the Hero in You gets paid to Western Community Kansas Foundation at $25 an hour. That's free money. That feeds families. That's a sustainable giving engine. That's what Microsoft created. So not only do we have that, but we also match every dollar at 100%. I think we're north of $2,000 at this point, and it'll keep growing. But most importantly, we were partners, and we helped Connie. And I think Connie would say she's never seen a corporation do what we've done, and that makes me very proud, right? Because part of why I show up every day isn't just for my paycheck. It's to be able to travel around this country as a child of immigrants, a first-generation American, and know that a small idea, I can't let this one go. I would tell Ben Anderson, I can't let this one go. And I remember when Matt called me after Dan passed away, I was on a business trip, and I just sobbed. I sobbed because, like everybody said, to know Dan was to know somebody who was a friend. And to think that, me, college-educated, pretty smart cookie, found myself going to Dan for life advice. How crazy is that, right? And that's what I miss the most, is he always had those simple answers, just like Ben Anderson said, right? Where he had that option to choose between fear and love. And when I look at the opportunity of what we have to do, what we can do with this opportunity is to synergize and replace random acts of violence with random acts of kindness. And I'm very hopeful that this concept, this idea, this passion project that I had for my friend Dan Day will turn into something really meaningful. I wanted to close by sharing something. I don't know who wrote this card to me, but it brought me to tears because it's true, and I wasn't sure what impact that this trip would have on me. I've never been to Kansas. I was making jokes about wearing red shoes today, but I kept it serious. But Amy from Garden City wrote me this note, and she said, Noah, you listened to the deep whispers of your heart, and you helped a soul and a community. And I can't thank you enough, Amy, for writing this, because that's exactly why I did it, because I listened to my heart. I had no idea where this was going to go. I'm honestly stunned and shocked that my respect and honor for what Dan did. And Sherilyn, I know it's been tough. And I know you really miss him, and I know your kids really miss him. And I can't imagine how much you miss him compared to how much we miss him. And I miss him a whole lot. And I never even had the pleasure of looking your husband in the eye. He never agreed to do a FaceTime. But I thank you, Garden City and great state of Kansas, for your warmth, your generosity. I was so nervous to come down. I had no idea what to expect. And it's been nothing short of outstanding. And I hope that this little effort that I've made, great effort, as Matt will tell you, lots of time on the phone, it's brought me unexpected joy, and I hope it does the same for you. So thank you very much. I'm afraid to put this down. I don't want it to light up or something.
Thank you. And last, I would invite Connie Bogard and Deb Boiler to come up, and they'll just quickly tell you about the Hero in You Fund. And when they're done speaking, that will conclude tonight's event. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your attention to all these panelists. It's been a wonderful evening, and as they're coming up, I'd also like to thank the City of Garden City staff that worked tirelessly over the last month and especially the last couple of days to pull this event off. They will continue to work tirelessly as we turn this back into a gymnasium, just like we promised Dr. Ruda we would. So the night's not over for us, but if you'd give them a round of applause for the work they've done so far and the work we still have left to do. I will turn it over to you, Connie.
Thank you, Matt. My name is Connie Bogart. I'm the Executive Director for the Western Kansas Community Foundation, located here in Garden City. And I feel tremendously inspired by this evening. I'm sure you all are. This is a powerful message that we have here today. And I'm here with Deborah Euler from the Finney County United Way. And we are again also bringing a call to action. We heard a lot of calls to action here tonight. Many, many powerful calls to action, from knocking on your neighbor's door to just trying to bridge that gap between you and your neighbor. Our organizations are going about it also in a little different way. We totally understand, of course, the simplicity, in a way, of reaching out to your neighbor by crossing your street, knocking on somebody's door. But there are many, many other ways that we can try to help. And our organizations do it through philanthropy, through charitable donations. And we are tremendously proud as the Community Foundation to be able to partner with the City of Garden City, Microsoft, and the Finney County United Way, that we have established this fund now, the Hero in You Fund, in memory of Dan Day, that is going to be earmarked for assistance, financial assistance, for people who have become victims of hate crimes. And it's not only that, it goes further than that, because when Matt Allen from the city came to me and launched this idea of setting up a fund with the help of Microsoft, it was clear that he had a much broader vision. And that much broader vision, I couldn't be more proud of him saying that, because it is really, really urgent that we address some of the hate crimes and the racial disparity that exists in our society. In the philanthropic field, we even see it every day, the rise of hate crime groups that are often disguised as a nonprofit. Every day, new nonprofit organizations are being established that are actually based on hate crime ideologies. And it's very difficult for us, am I talking too long? For us as charitable organizations to identify sometimes what is really behind it. So luckily we have, of course, organizations like the FBI and others who are looking into this diligently. But for us as grant makers, it's not always clear. So this set aside, we are tremendously proud that we have a fund now that is going to address the financial assistance to refugees and migrants coming to Garden City, but also assisting individuals and families that are impacted by the trauma of acts of violence and or threats of acts of violence, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, or their religious beliefs. And we want to improve the accessibility also for education for refugees, migrants, and their families. So over time, we hope that we have enough assets in this fund that we can endow it, that we can invest it, so that we can generate income for scholarships to help migrant families to let their kids go through school and college, hopefully. So that's the purpose of this fund that is now housed at the Western Kansas Community Foundation, but we cannot give money away to individuals. Luckily, the Finney County United Way can, so that's why we are so excited to partner with the Finney County United Way. So I'm turning it over to Deb Euler so that she can explain a little bit more how that exactly works.
Well, we're very proud to be a part of this fund as well, and to be able to really make a difference in the community. We do it on a daily basis anyway, but in my opinion, and on behalf of the board, when I pitched this idea to the board, they were, kind of wondering, what are we partnering with here? But it became clear that this was a path that we needed to go down, and this was something that we needed to do. And we're very proud to partner with Western Kansas Community Foundation and the Community Relations Board in the City of Garden City. And Noah, thank you so much for getting it started. And to the Day family, you know, our thoughts and prayers are with you. Inside your program, there is a QR code. And if you would like to give online, you can do so. We have received donations this way. So far this evening, I've been diligently checking my email, and I love seeing them come in. Typical fundraiser, right? But at the door, there are 4 pastors who will also collect cash. And if you would like to do your donation in a check, then you can make it out to Finney County United Way. If you want it to go specifically to the Dan Day Fund, make sure you just put that in there. But then on that QR code, it does give you the option for it to go specifically to Dan's family. Again, thank you so much for coming tonight, and we're proud to be a part of this, and have a great rest of your evening.